He met her on an ordinary evening that felt no different from many others. He had just finished a long day of work and stopped by a small cafe near the bus stop. The place was quiet, with only a few people sitting around. She was there, sitting by the window, reading a book with a worn cover. Nothing about her stood out at first. She was dressed simply, spoke softly to the server, and kept to herself. But when their eyes met, she smiled in a way that felt honest and warm. They started talking by chance. He asked about the book she was reading. She answered politely, then asked about his day. The conversation flowed easily, like they had known each other longer than a few minutes. She laughed at his jokes, not loudly, but in a gentle way that made him feel seen. When they parted that night, he felt lighter, as if something good had quietly entered his life. After that, they began meeting often. Sometimes it was at the cafe, other times at the park nearby. She liked simple walks, cheap street food, and sitting on benches just watching people pass by. She never suggested fancy places or expensive plans. She said she didn't need much to be happy. It made him like her even more. He had always believed real love was simple and calm, not loud or flashy. She told him she lived alone and worked small jobs here and there. She never complained about money or life, even though it was clear she didn't have much. When he offered to help sometimes, she refused kindly, saying she liked standing on her own feet. He respected that. To him, she felt real, grounded, and different from others he had known before. There were things she didn't talk about much. Her family, for example. When he asked about them, she would smile and change the topic. At first, he thought she might have painful memories. He didn't want to push her. He believed that everyone had parts of their life they weren't ready to share. Love, in his mind, meant patience. They grew closer with time. She listened carefully when he spoke about his struggles, his worries about work, and his fear of never doing enough. She never judged him. She encouraged him quietly, telling him that effort mattered more than results. Those words stayed with him. He began to imagine a future with her, one built slowly, step by step. He noticed how comfortable she was with silence. They could sit for long minutes without speaking, and it never felt awkward. She would sometimes look at the sky as if thinking deeply, then smile again. He thought it was beautiful, thought he understood her. Friends who met her described her as kind but ordinary. Some asked what he saw in her. He would smile and say that not everything valuable needed to shine loudly. To him, she was special because she felt real. There was no drama, no games, just steady affection. Sometimes, though, small things felt strange. Her phone would ring, and she would look at the screen before putting it away without answering. When he asked who it was, she would say it was nothing important. He believed her. He wanted to believe her. He told himself that trust was the base of any strong relationship. There were moments when she seemed distracted, as if her mind was far away. When he asked if something was wrong, she would shake her head and say she was just tired. He would hold her hand and tell her to rest. He never imagined there was more to it. One evening, as they walked home together, he spoke about his dreams. He talked about saving enough money to start a small business one day, maybe moving to a quieter place. She listened carefully, then said she admired his courage. She said dreams didn't need to be big to be meaningful. That sentence made him feel understood in a way few people ever had. He started believing that love like this was rare. He believed he was lucky. He believed she had chosen him simply because she cared. That thought gave him strength during hard days. When she stayed over at his place, she never acted demanding. She helped clean, cooked simple meals, and thanked him for small things. She noticed details others ignored. If he looked tired, she would make tea without being asked. If he was quiet, she wouldn't force conversation. He felt peaceful around her. Yet she always avoided one thing. She never invited him to her place. She said it was too small and messy. He laughed and told her he didn't mind. Still, she changed the subject every time. He didn't question it deeply. Love, he believed, meant accepting imperfections. As weeks turned into months, he stopped imagining life without her. She had become part of his routine, part of his comfort. He trusted her fully. He thought he knew who she was, a simple girl who loved quietly and asked for little. He had no idea that this calm beginning was only the surface of something much deeper. He did not know that the silence she carried was not emptiness, but a secret waiting for the right moment to step into his life. For now, all he knew was that he loved her, and he believed that love was enough. Life continued in a calm rhythm, but small changes slowly began to appear. At first, he didn't notice them. Or maybe he noticed but chose not to think too much. He was happy, and happiness can sometimes make people look away from things that don't fit the picture they want to believe. She started checking her phone more often. Not openly, but in quiet moments when she thought he wasn't watching. A quick glance, a pause, then the phone slipped back into her bag. When he asked if everything was okay, she would smile and say yes, always yes. Her smile was still warm, but sometimes it didn't reach her eyes. There were days when she seemed distant. She would sit beside him, hold his hand, but her mind felt far away. He would talk and she would nod, listening, but her responses came a little late. He asked once if something was troubling her. She shook her head and said she was just tired from work. He believed her. Everyone gets tired, he told himself. They still met often, but sometimes plans changed suddenly. She would cancel at the last moment, saying something urgent came up. Her voice would sound apologetic, almost nervous. He would tell her it was fine, that they could meet another day. Inside, though, a small question began to form. Pushed it aside. One afternoon, they were walking through a crowded street when she suddenly stopped. Her face lost color for a moment. She turned her head quickly, as if avoiding someone. He asked what was wrong. She said she thought she saw someone she knew and didn't want to deal with old problems. He didn't ask more. He thought it was about her past. Something she wasn't ready to open up about. He began noticing how careful she was about certain topics. Money, for example. If he talked about prices going up or saving for the future, she would listen quietly, but rarely add much. Yet sometimes she used words that didn't match the life she claimed to live. Once, she mentioned a place he had only heard about in news stories, not from people around him. When he asked how she knew about it, she laughed softly and said she read a lot. He smiled and accepted it. Despite these moments, there were still many good days. Days when she cooked simple meals with him, laughing when something went wrong. Days when they walked for hours, talking about dreams and fears. She still cared for him in small ways, and those moments mattered more to him than any doubt. One evening, he invited her to meet a few of his close friends. She agreed, but seemed nervous. When they arrived, she was polite, calm, and quiet. She answered questions carefully, never sharing too much. His friends later said she was nice, but hard to read. He defended her, saying not everyone liked attention. After that night, she became more withdrawn for a few days. He worried he had pushed her into something uncomfortable. He apologized, even though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. She hugged him and said he did nothing wrong. Her voice sounded soft, but there was sadness in it. Late one night, while they sat together in silence, her phone rang again. This time, he clearly saw the tension in her body. She looked at the screen for a long moment, then stood up and walked into another room before answering. He heard her voice, low and serious, very different from how she spoke to him. When she returned, she said it was a work issue. He nodded, but the uneasy feeling stayed with him. He began to feel like there were two versions of her. The one with him was gentle, caring, and simple. The other, hidden behind phone calls and sudden absences, felt distant and unknown. He didn't know which one was real, or if both were. Still, he chose trust. He reminded himself that love was not about control or constant questioning. If she needed space, he would give it. If she had a past she wasn't ready to share, he would wait. One day, he suggested they plan something. Small for the future, maybe a short trip or moving in together someday. The moment he said it, he felt her hand tighten around his. She didn't pull away, but she didn't answer right away either. Finally, she said she needed time. Her voice shook slightly. He told her there was no rush. That night after she left, he sat alone and thought about everything. The quiet love he believed in was still there, but now it carried questions. He wondered if loving someone also meant being prepared for truths you might not like. The next morning, She sent him a message saying she missed him. He smiled at his phone, feeling foolish for doubting her. Love, he decided, was about faith. What he didn't know was that the distance he felt was not growing by accident. The forces outside their simple world were moving closer. The life she had tried so hard to leave behind was slowly finding its way back. And soon, someone would step into their story who would make it impossible for the truth to stay hidden any longer. He felt their lives moving forward slowly, one day at a time, until that unexpected afternoon when everything changed. They had planned a simple walk through a quiet park, the kind of day he had grown used to sharing with her. The sun was soft, casting long shadows across the path. She walked beside him, her hand in his, smiling as they talked about nothing important at all. It was a peaceful day, so he thought. From the corner of his eye, he saw someone approaching them. At first he thought it was a stranger, just another person enjoying the park. But as the figure came closer, he noticed a certain confidence in their steps, a presence that felt deliberate, like someone who had a reason to be there. And then she stopped walking, her hand slipping from his without him noticing at first. He looked down at her and saw something he hadn't seen before. Unease. Before he could ask what was wrong, she stiffened, her eyes fixed on the approaching figure. The stranger stopped a few feet away, and when she spoke, her voice was different, formal, measured, almost commanding. She called the stranger Mom. He froze. Mom? He had never heard her speak of her mother. She had never even mentioned family beyond vague memories. He felt a sudden, heavy confusion. The woman was tall, dressed elegantly, and carried herself with an air of authority that made the world seem smaller around her. Her eyes scanned him quickly, assessing, weighing, and then her gaze returned to her daughter. She smiled faintly, and in that moment he felt a chill. Something about this woman felt familiar, yet powerful, and he realized instinctively that she was not someone ordinary. His mind raced with questions. But before he could speak, the woman addressed him directly. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that made him feel like a child being examined. She asked questions he wasn't ready for, questions about his intentions, his background, his dreams, and his stability. He answered honestly, though every word felt like it was being measured. Tested, her daughter stood quietly, her usual calm demeanor replaced with tension. She didn't interrupt, but her eyes flickered toward him now and then, as if apologizing without words. He noticed her hand tremble slightly. He realized then that the small, ordinary life he thought he understood was only a part of the story. A hidden part, one she had not shared, and one he wasn't ready for. The woman spoke at length, and though he tried to follow, some of her words felt distant, like they belonged to a world he had never entered. She mentioned responsibilities, expectations, and obligations that seemed impossible to ignore. Things about wealth, influence, and history that made him feel suddenly out of place, like he was in a room meant for someone else. And through it all, he noticed his girlfriend's face, pale and unreadable, holding herself straight. Trying to keep the situation calm, he struggled to reconcile the girl he loved with the reality now standing before him. She had been quiet, humble, and simple, but that had been only one side of her life. The other side, this hidden world her mother represented, had always existed. And now it was here, forcing him to see everything he hadn't known. He wanted to speak to her, to ask why she hadn't told him, but the moment felt wrong. Her mother's presence commanded attention, and he realized that the revelation was not his alone to process. Her daughter finally spoke, her voice small compared to her mother's, apologizing for the secrets, for the lies, for the parts of life she couldn't share. She told him that love had been real, that her feelings were true, but circumstances had forced her to hide pieces of herself. He felt a wave of emotion and anger, confusion, betrayal, and yet deep down, understanding. She had been cautious, protecting him and herself from a reality that could have overwhelmed their early love. He wanted to yell, to demand answers, to know why she hadn't trusted him, but the moment was delicate. Her mother's gaze never left him, and he felt that every word he spoke carried weight. As they walked together in the park, the conversation became more personal. Her mother shared stories of her daughter's childhood, the pressures she had faced, the expectations she had grown up with. He learned of sacrifices, of hidden responsibilities, of a life that had been carefully shielded from the world. And as he listened, he began to see why she had chosen the quiet life she had built with him, a life of simplicity and warmth, away from the demands of her real world. Yet, the revelation did not make everything easier. He realized that love alone might not be enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. The simplicity he had cherished now felt fragile, and the trust he had placed in her was tested in ways he had never imagined. He felt lost, unsure of where he stood, unsure if the bond they had built could survive the truth. In the days that followed, he replayed every moment they had shared. He remembered her laughter, the gentle way she listened, the care she showed in small gestures. And he remembered the times when she had seemed distant, the phone calls she avoided, the sudden absences. He now understood them differently. They were not signs of disinterest or deceit, but of caution and protection. He began to realize that love was more complex than he had believed. It was not just about emotions or simple acts of kindness. It was about trust, understanding, patience, and sometimes forgiveness. It was about accepting someone fully, including the parts they could not easily show, the burdens they carried silently. Her mother continued to watch him, and slowly he understood that she was not an enemy, but a guide, someone who had shaped the woman he loved into the person she was. Her presence was a reminder of responsibility, of reality, and of the depth of the life that had been hidden from him by the end of their encounter in the park. He felt a mix of relief and tension. Relief that the truth was finally out, that nothing was hidden anymore. And tension because the world he had believed in had changed. The girl he loved was still the same in heart and emotion, but her life had layers he could not ignore as they walked away. He held her hand again, feeling the warmth he had always loved. But now, he knew that every step forward would require understanding, patience, and courage. The love that had begun so simply had grown into something more complicated, but also more real. He felt the weight of the truth, but also the possibility that love, if strong enough, could endure even the deepest revelations. He didn't yet know what the future held, but he felt that their story had entered a new chapter, one where honesty and reality could no longer be ignored. And in that quiet, difficult moment, he realized that the girl he had thought he knew had a strength he had never imagined him, that loving her fully would demand everything he had to give. After the day in the park, everything felt different. He could not stop thinking about the conversation with her mother. It had been polite, even gentle at times, but the truth it revealed shook the foundation of the life he had built with her. He realized that the quiet, ordinary world he had believed in was only a part of the reality she carried with her. Over the next few days, he tried to process what he had learned. She continued to act normally, laughing at small jokes, listening carefully when he spoke, and holding his hand as they walked. Yet, he noticed subtle changes. She seemed more tense, her eyes carrying a weight he had never seen before. He wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but he also knew that she needed space to explain things on her own terms. Finally, one evening, they sat together in the small living room of his apartment. She was quiet at first, her fingers tracing the edge of a coffee cup. Then she spoke, her voice low and careful. She began to tell him about her life, about the family she had tried to shield him from, about the responsibilities she had been managing in secret. He listened in silence, feeling a mixture of shock, sadness, and understanding. She told him that her family was not like the one she had described. They were wealthy, influential, and had expectations that could not be ignored. She explained that she had wanted to live a simple life, away from the pressures of that world, and had found a temporary escape with him. Every act of care, every moment of shared laughter had been genuine, but it had existed alongside responsibilities he could not yet see. He asked why she had never told him before. Her eyes filled with tears, and she said she had been afraid that he would leave, afraid that he could not understand, afraid that the love they shared would be lost if he knew the truth. Her voice trembled as she explained how hard it had been to carry that secret, and how much she had wanted to protect both him and herself. He felt anger rising, not because she had hidden things from him, but because of the pain he imagined she had endured alone. He realized how brave she had been, managing a life full of demands and pressures while still showing him love, gentleness, and warmth. He understood that her strength had been present all along, quietly. In every act of care, she went on to explain the complexity of her world. There were family expectations, social obligations, and personal responsibilities that could not be ignored. She had feared that revealing the truth too early would ruin the simplicity they had built together. She told him that every word, every smile, and every gesture had been sincere, even as she navigated a life far more complicated than he had imagined. He asked her if she loved him. She nodded, tears falling freely now. Her voice was firm, yet soft, telling him that her love had been real from the start. She explained that the truth did not diminish her feelings, but added a layer of honesty that could no longer be avoided. She wanted him to know everything, so that if they stayed together, it would be as complete as possible. He felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that the truth was out in the open, fear of how this would change their lives. He realized that loving her fully meant accepting the entirety of her world, not just the part she had shared. It meant understanding her fears, her obligations, and the strength she had used to navigate life silently. Over the next few weeks, they spent long hours talking. They revisited past conversations and moments, understanding them in the context of the new truth. He learned why she had acted a certain way at times, why she had avoided some questions, and why her life had seemed at once simple and mysterious. Each revelation brought clarity, but also new challenges. He saw the courage it took for her to reveal these things. Every detail of her hidden life carried weight, but she had trusted him enough to finally share it. He admired her for it, realizing that love was not just about comfort or routine, but also about honesty, trust, and mutual understanding. He began to ask himself difficult questions. Could he continue to love her knowing the full extent of her life? Could he accept the responsibilities, the expectations, and the complications that came with her truth? He realized that love was no longer just an emotion, it was a choice, a decision to stand beside someone fully. Even when the world was complex and challenging, they faced moments of tension and confusion. Some days were quiet and heavy, with unspoken worries hanging between them. Other days were filled with laughter and warmth, reminders of the connection that had drawn them together in the first place. Through it all, they communicated openly, sharing fears and hopes in ways they had never needed to before. He also began to understand her in new ways. The patience she had shown, the quiet support, and the gentle guidance had not been simple acts. They had been acts of strength, born from a life that demanded resilience. Every smile, every small gesture, was now illuminated by the understanding of her hidden struggles. Her mother remained in the background, quiet presence that symbolized the reality he had to accept. Occasionally he interacted with her, seeing the woman who had shaped his girlfriend's strength and character. He realized that the woman who had seemed so distant and authoritative was part of the reason. The girl he loved had become the person she was: resilient, compassionate, and strong. By the end of this period, he felt a shift within himself. He realized that love was not about avoiding difficulties or pretending life was simple. It was about facing challenges together, accepting each other's truths, and growing stronger as a result. The bond they had shared in simpler times had evolved, and now it carried a depth that made it both fragile and powerful. He also began to understand that forgiveness was part of love. Forgiving her for the secrecy, forgiving himself for the doubts, and forgiving the circumstances that had kept them from fully knowing each other earlier. Each act of forgiveness strengthened the connection, allowing them to move forward with honesty. Their love, once simple and quiet, had become layered and profound. It was no longer just about shared walks, laughter, and small joys. It was about trust, understanding, acceptance, and resilience. He knew that the future would not be easy, but he also knew that the foundation they had built, now reinforced with truth and honesty, could withstand the challenges ahead in the quiet moments. When they held hands or shared a simple meal, he felt the same warmth he had felt in the beginning. But now it was deeper, tempered by understanding and the knowledge that their love had survived the first test, the revelation of truth. He realized that this was only the beginning of a more honest, real journey together. One that demanded courage, but promised a bond far stronger than what he had known before. He knew that everything had changed, but he also knew that the love he felt for her was not gone. It had transformed, becoming stronger and more complex. He began to understand that true love was not simple or easy. It was about facing life together, with all its challenges, expectations, and hidden truths. In the days that followed, they spent more time together than ever, talking openly about the future. He asked her about her responsibilities and obligations, and she explained them patiently, without bitterness or complaint. He listened carefully, trying to understand the weight she carried and the sacrifices she had made. Each revelation deepened his respect and admiration for her. He realized that loving her fully meant embracing not just the gentle, ordinary moments, but also the hidden, demanding parts of her life. They began to make plans together, small at first. Simple things like cooking a meal together or taking a short trip. She wanted to share her world slowly, letting him understand without feeling overwhelmed. He accepted it, knowing that patience was now part of their love. He wanted to prove that he could be there for her, no matter how complicated her life became. Some days were challenging. He felt moments of doubt and insecurity. Could he handle the life she had? Could he stand beside her when her family and obligations demanded attention? He questioned himself. But every time he looked at her, he saw the same gentle, loving girl he had fallen for. That girl had not changed, and he knew that the love they shared could endure the challenges ahead. They shared moments of vulnerability, where words were not enough. Sometimes they would sit in silence, holding hands, letting the weight of their thoughts and emotions settle around them. In those moments, he felt their connection deeply. The love that had begun simply now carried depth, understanding, and resilience. He realized that these quiet moments, these small acts of shared strength, were the foundation of true intimacy. Her mother continued to be present in their lives, but no longer as a mysterious, distant figure. He began to see her as a guide, someone who had shaped the woman he loved. They had conversations, sometimes difficult, but always respectful. He realized that accepting her mother was part of accepting the complete truth of her life, and he embraced it as part of their journey. Over time, they found balance. She shared her world, and he adapted, learning how to navigate the responsibilities and challenges she faced. They learned to communicate more openly, to express fears and hopes without hesitation. They discovered that love was not about perfection, but about commitment, understanding, and mutual support. He also learned to appreciate the ordinary moments even more. A quiet morning together, a shared meal, a walk in the park, these simple things became precious. Reminders of the love that had brought them together in the first place. He realized that the extraordinary challenges in her life did not diminish these moments. They made them more meaningful. One evening, they sat together on a bench overlooking the city lights. She leaned her head on his shoulder and he held her close. They were silent, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the understanding and trust they had built. He realized that love had grown, not weaker or fragile, but stronger and more enduring because of the truth they had shared. He reflected on their journey, from the first meeting in the cafe to the revelations and challenges they had faced. He understood now that love was not about simplicity or avoiding difficulties. It was about embracing the whole person, including the hidden parts, and choosing to stand together despite uncertainty. It was about trust, patience, and courage. She looked up at him, smiling softly, and he saw both the girl he had first loved and the strong, resilient woman she had become. He knew that their story was far from over, but he also knew that they were ready to face it together. The love that had started quietly and simply had evolved into something real, profound, and lasting. In the following weeks, they began to make more concrete plans for the future. Not grand or extravagant plans, but realistic ones, built on trust and mutual understanding. They discussed moving in together, managing responsibilities, and balancing their personal lives with the expectations that had once seemed overwhelming. Every conversation reinforced their commitment, reminding them that love was an active choice, not just a feeling. He also learned to appreciate the small acts of strength and courage in her everyday life. The way she managed her work, the way she handled unexpected challenges, the way she cared for others quietly and without complaint. He realized that love was about noticing these moments, valuing them, standing beside her through them. Their relationship deepened in ways he had never anticipated. The challenges they faced brought them closer, teaching them patience, empathy, and resilience. They laughed more freely, knowing that their bond was strong enough to endure difficulties. They cried together, sharing fears and doubts, and finding comfort in mutual support. He understood now that the love he had thought was simple had never been ordinary. It had been layered, rich, and demanding from the start, and only by embracing the full truth of her life could he truly love her. He felt gratitude for the journey, for the trust she had shown, and for the strength they had discovered together in the end. He realized that love was not about avoiding the complexities of life, but about facing them together. It was about trust, patience, understanding, and courage. It was about accepting the person fully, including the hidden parts, and building a life together based on honesty and mutual respect. As they walked hand in hand through the city streets, he felt a quiet confidence in their future. The challenges were still there, and the world was not simple, but their love had grown into something real and lasting. He knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together, stronger and more united than ever before. The girl he had thought he knew had revealed her truth, and in doing so, had given him the greatest gift of all, the chance to love fully and honestly. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that their love had endured the first great test, and that together, they could build a life filled with trust, understanding, and genuine happiness, even after they had shared the full truth and begun to navigate their new reality together.
Wow.
Life continued to test them. The world outside was unpredictable, and the complexities of her life, combined with his own challenges, demanded constant attention, understanding, and compromise. Yet he realized that these challenges, instead of weakening their bond, were shaping it into something more resilient. He noticed small changes in himself as well. He had become more patient, more observant, and more understanding. He no longer expected life to be simple, and he had learned that love was not just about emotion, but about action and commitment. He saw the courage it took for her to reveal her truth, to face her own fears, and to trust him completely. That courage inspired him, and he wanted to match it in his own way. They began spending time with her mother more often. At first, these meetings were awkward. He felt the weight of authority, the expectation to meet certain standards he wasn't sure he could reach. Her mother asked questions about their plans, about stability, about how he would be part of her daughter's life in practical ways. Each question felt like a test, but he answered honestly, relying on sincerity rather than pretense. Over time, her mother's demeanor softened, and he realized that she was not an obstacle, but a guardian of the person he loved. Her presence became something he could appreciate, even respect. He and his girlfriend started to plan more seriously for the future. It was no longer about small walks in the park or casual meetups. They discussed long-term goals, financial planning, and the possibility of moving closer to each other. She shared insights from her world knowledge and responsibilities he had never encountered before. He listened, learned, and adapted, determined to stand beside her as a true partner. Despite their planning, there were moments of tension. She had obligations that required sudden attention, and he sometimes felt frustrated, missing the simplicity of their early days together. But rather than letting these moments create distance, they used them as opportunities to communicate and understand each other more deeply. He learned that patience was not passive, it was active engagement, listening and adapting. One day they visited a community event she had been part of in secret. She introduced him to people who had been impacted by her work, people who had been helped or guided quietly. Seeing her in this context, he realized the full scope of her character. She had always been compassionate, strong, and selfless, and now he could see the ripple effect of her efforts. His admiration deepened, and he felt even more committed to their shared future. They also found time for ordinary moments. He realized that these moments, which had seemed mundane before, were vital to sustaining their relationship. Cooking a meal together, sharing a quiet evening at home, or simply sitting and talking about nothing at all, these became precious. They reminded him that love was built in both extraordinary challenges and ordinary gestures. Over time, he noticed a change in her as well. She seemed lighter, more relaxed, as if sharing the truth had lifted a weight from her shoulders. The fear that he might reject her had diminished, replaced by trust and confidence in their bond. They laughed more freely, shared hopes more openly, and faced difficulties with a sense of partnership that had been impossible in the past. There were still external pressures. Family expectations, societal opinions, and personal obligations continued to challenge them. Yet these pressures no longer intimidated him. He had learned that love was not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them together. Every challenge became a chance to demonstrate commitment, empathy, and resilience. He began to appreciate the subtle, often unseen ways she contributed to their life together. The quiet support, the careful consideration of his feelings, and the small acts of kindness that he had once taken for granted now stood out clearly. He understood that love was not only about grand gestures, but also it's about these moments of consistent care. They also encountered moments of disagreement. Not major conflicts, but differences in perspective that needed negotiation. He realized that compromise was not a weakness, but a strength. Listening, understanding, and finding common ground became the way they reinforced their bond. Each disagreement, handled respectfully, strengthened their connection rather than weakening it. Their relationship began to attract attention from friends and acquaintances. Some were surprised at how strong their connection had become despite the challenges. Others wondered how they managed to balance her complicated life with a seemingly ordinary relationship. He realized that their love had become an example, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, tested, and enduring. He also spent time reflecting on his own growth. He had learned to be more flexible, to accept complexity, and to find strength in vulnerability. Loving her had taught him patience, understanding, and the importance of seeing the full picture before making judgments. He recognized that love was as much about personal growth as it was about connection with another person, together. They began to envision a future that balanced both worlds. They made plans that respected her obligations in his own life, finding a rhythm that worked for both. They spoke openly about fears, dreams, and practical steps, ensuring that honesty remained the foundation of their relationship. He realized that planning together, with transparency and trust, created stability and strengthened their bond. One evening, after a long day of managing responsibilities, they sat together on a quiet terrace overlooking the city lights. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her. They were tired, yet content. In that quiet moment, he reflected on the journey they had taken from casual beginnings to complex realities and felt gratitude for their love, which had endured through honesty, patience, and understanding. He realized that the love he had first felt for her was only the beginning. The love he now felt was deeper, richer, and more resilient. It was a love that embraced complexity, accepted challenges, and celebrated the person she truly was. He knew that life would continue to test them, but he also knew that together they could face anything. The girl he had thought he knew had revealed herself fully, and in doing so, had shown him the power of honesty and courage. Their relationship had evolved from simple affection into a partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual support. Each step forward was taken together, the clear understanding of each other's realities. In the following months, they continued to grow closer. They celebrated successes, supported each other through difficulties, and found joy in everyday moments. He learned that love was not static. It evolved, deepened, and strengthened when nurtured with care and honesty. And he realized that the challenges they had faced were not obstacles, but opportunities to prove their commitment and resilience. Ultimately, he understood that love was about more than shared feelings. It was about shared life, shared understanding, and shared growth. It was about accepting each other fully, standing together through challenges, and building a future based on trust and respect. The journey had been difficult, but it had created a bond that was strong, enduring, deeply meaningful. As they walked hand in hand through the city streets, he felt a quiet confidence in their future. The love they had nurtured through honesty, patience, understanding, was now capable of withstanding the challenges that life would inevitably bring. He knew that together they could navigate whatever came their way, building a life filled with trust, happiness, and shared purpose. The story that had begun as a simple love had grown into something extraordinary. It had faced tests, endured revelations, and survived challenges, emerging stronger and more real than ever. He knew that their love was not perfect, but it was true, resilient, and capable of lasting through the complexities of life. And in that truth he found hope, peace, and the confidence to face the future together. Hand in hand, with hearts fully open and committed,